Hi, welcome or welcome back. My name is Eleanor, and this week I've discovered my all-time favorite writer. I don't think that will ever change, but I only discovered him exactly a week ago. I'd like to share his world with you as much as I can on the off chance that perhaps one of you might find a place for yourself in his world of imagination as well. His name is Gerald Murnane, and he's been writing for a very long time. He's in his 80s and he's Australian. I would describe his work. Now, I've only read two short stories and two of his novels, but I already feel that I do know him. His work is an experience. When you read his text, it's not the usual way you read a work. You are immersed in his imagination and the actual language so that you have to experience it. I at first thought I would use the analogy of diving into water like the ocean. Maybe if you've ever gone diving or snorkeling, even when you're immersed in the underwater world, you're just so busy taking it all in, it's quite separate from your experience of life. But I immediately thought, no, actually that's wrong because he goes to great pains in his works that I've read so far to explain that he's not showing an alternate reality. He's showing reality. So you won't be able to use an analogy of underwater world. You won't be able to use an analogy of far away, like a linguistic world far away that you've gone to visit. It's not a world of the heavens, and it's not underground. It's a world of what he calls the plains, flat image landscape into which he enters, and he's able to put into words this experience. And it's not about a specific land. It's connected to Australia, but it's not Australia. It's connected to the world, but it's not the world as we know it. It is the plains. And on the plains, there are different people, there are different houses, different experiences, and they're very fluid. So even the usual boundaries are off kilter or wavering. So the boundary between yourself and other people, the boundary between outside, inside, and definitely the boundary between fiction and non-fiction, or fiction and biography or autobiography, is very fluid. Now, you're probably thinking of Rachel Karsk or Sheila Heti or Clarice Lispector. Yes, if you liked them, you probably go a bit nuts about Gerald Murnane. I mean, as I did. But he also stands alone. He stands alone. Now, reviews talk about, comparing him to Proust with the idea of memory and time. But Gerald Murnane, he's here for, I feel that he's here for me with open arms and a sense of humor. None of his books are long. He's not busy writing a masterpiece that I'm going to have to spend 5 months in a workshop on. He's writing relatively short novels and short stories that are manageable. They invite you in. Even if your experience of life is completely different from his, I would say that I have almost nothing in common on paper with Gerald Murnane. And yet, his world has become my world. He's also, his generosity is also exhibited in a book he recently wrote. I think this came out in 2021, called Last Letter to a Reader. As he's getting older, he is very aware that there will be a time when he will stop writing, and there will be a time when he'll have no control over his work. So he's leaving as much as he can. And this really is a set of essays that are letters to us, his readers, and each one is about one of his books. So when the first book I read of his was Border Districts, and then I looked at his Last Letter to a Reader, and sure enough, he has several pages about what he was thinking about when he started writing the book, what are his main thoughts now, and what he'd like to tell us about it. He's not at all posing in any way. He, from a young age, was driven to writing in this way. He has spent and is still spending his entire life writing simply what he must write. He lives very simply in Australia, in the state of Victoria, in a country town. He has no computer, no phone. If you want to get in touch with him, you have to leave a message with the golf club, because he occasionally goes there to play golf. He has been, up until the last couple of years, ignored by the Literary Society of Australia, be it what it might be, which is a shock when you read his work. I mean, it's ridiculous. And it's only a couple of years ago that it seems that Europeans and Americans rediscovered him. Murnane has recurring images in his works, and they're a true delight to inhabit. Some of them are houses. There's a particular pub where artists gather. There's a church house where there's some stained glass windows. There are colors of jockeys' shirts. There are names of horses, marbles and pebbles. a childhood of imagination that then translates into the highest form of literature. If you enjoy anything meta, then you'll love this, because his works really are commentaries on the way he views his imagination and his writing. But they can be read in many different ways. His most famous work is The Plains. I dislike this cover intensely, but what can you do? It's a work that can be read in many different ways. But at some point I thought to myself, I think this is about the search for love and finding love. A book like The Plains sounds like it's going to be talking about the outback. It's not about the outback. It's not about Australia. It's not about any of that. But he's using, because he's Australian, he's never actually traveled outside of Australia. He doesn't want to. He sits in his darkened room with his typewriter and he types with one finger, and he comes up with these magnificent worlds. And so, yes, it's part of his imagery and part of his imagination is absolutely Australian, but it really feels like it has almost no connection to everything else. Go and jump in. Gerald Murnane, thank you. And don't forget, the only real property is the property of the mind.